Hello, this is Talip Küçükcan. I welcome you to the TRT World Forum expert session on the Turkish foreign policy. I'll be very pleased to moderate this session with excellent speakers and contributors. Today, at this last session of TRT World Forum, we will be debating the Turkish foreign policy in the context of tradition, geopolitics, and ideology in a changing world order. Today, we have got Faruk Kaymakcı, one of the speakers. He is the Deputy Foreign Minister and Director of EU Affairs. Professor Burhanettin Duran, he is the General Coordinator of SETA Foundation and also Professor at Ibn Khaldun University. We have got Francis Ricciardone, who is the President of American University in Cairo, and he was former US Ambassador to Turkey and Egypt. And also we have Joachim Bitterlich. He is a member of Board of Directors of Jacques Delors Institute. Gentlemen, welcome you to this important session. We are going to look at challenges that Turkish foreign policy is facing today. I would like to start with Minister Faruk Kaymakcı as the Deputy Foreign Minister of Turkey. Turkey has been facing important challenges in its neighborhood and beyond. What are the main challenges, do you think, and how Turkey can overcome those challenges? So you can set up a framework for our discussion. You will have 7-8 minutes, Mr. Kaymakcı. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Talip Bey, dear speakers, dear discussants. I am glad to join you. We had some technical issue. I hope I didn't delay you too much, but I don't know it was only me or some other people as well. But anyway, at least we have saved some time thanks to the pandemic. So without coming together, from remote places, we can talk to each other. So to answer your question, of course, we are facing a dramatic process of transformation and change in the world. So we have some global fractures in politics, in economy, and when we look at the balance of power in the world, there are important developments, and also we have some sort of change of equations in geopolitics as well. What are these challenges? Of course, it is not only a concern for Turkey, but I think it is for everyone, for every country and for every region. First of all, of course, we have this COVID-19 pandemic, which is much more than a health crisis, but it is becoming a serious issue, also affecting our economies, our way of communication, our way of life. So we have also increasing asymmetric security threats, especially in the last few years. We have seen these terrorist attacks in different parts of the world. And then we have increasing inequality in the world. I think COVID-19 is also creating problems for this. And then climate change is also one of the major issues that we have to tackle together. And of course, there is also a problem of governance, I think, in the world. I think just having only elections and waiting for the election results in line with political parties do not solve our problems. The world has become much more complicated. I think we need maybe some sort of update in our democracies. And then, of course, we have irregular migration problem, which is a threat to all of us. And then, also, in reference to my previous point, governance problem, we have the rise of populism and the rise of far right, which is complicating our way of life, our social life. And then, of course, we have the rising powers, I would say, such as China and India. And of course, we have much more assertive Russia in our neighborhood. And transatlantic relations are also hurt very much. And this is also affecting Turkey and the rest of Europe. So these are, the challenges that we face altogether. So, of course, Turkey has a strong diplomatic tradition. It has a strong network of diplomatic missions, and we try to follow a principled, rule-based policy everywhere. And our perspective is 360 degree. And Turkey always tries to be on the side of the oppressed. So this is our tradition. When we look at our geopolitics, what we see is, of course, Turkey's unique location between different regions. On the one side you have the East and the Muslim world. On the other side, you have the West, and Turkey, has to follow all the developments in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea, in the Caucasia, in the Balkans. And Turkey also needs to have good relations with 14 neighbors from the land and from the sea. And also we have to look at, the religious nature of our regions. So three monotheistic religions are here, which are making and influencing our life on a daily basis. So, but despite all this, Turkey is parcel of Europe, and especially after the Second World War, Turkey played a major role in the reconstruction of Europe by being part of and founding member of the Council of Europe, and also a founding member of NATO. And Turkey is party to all European institutions and conventions. And of course, it is only natural that Turkey one day also becomes a full member of the EU. So our traditional and geopolitical approach in our diplomacy in the last, I would say, 65 years was basically we counted on the West, and we hope that the West would also fully support us, and the transatlantic relations would be always solid. But unfortunately, we faced some difficulties when we needed, for example, air defense missile system. We were not helped by our allies. And of course, when we wanted to be a full member of the EU, some EU member states used their veto right and abused their veto right and the EU membership solidarity against Turkey, and they wanted to make narrow-minded national gains, and I would say maximalist and irrational expectations from the Turkish accession by using their trump card in the EU. So this is why Turkey also needed to look for some alternatives. So today's Turkish foreign policy ideology is also initiative taking. It is proactive. We cannot just wait for the West and our NATO and other European allies to act. Unfortunately, they do not act as long as the problem doesn't knock on the very door of Western European friends. They don't give that much of attention, as we have seen in the case of irregular migration, as we have seen in the case of Iraq, Syria, Libya. So this is why Turkish policy has become, I would say, more proactive, more initiative taking. But this doesn't change the very nature of Turkish foreign policy, which means peace at home, peace at the world. This is always there. There is another principle which is also valid today, that is enterprising and humanitarian foreign policy. As you all know, Turkey is hosting around 4 million Syrians and others. And of course, this is a very humanitarian approach. And also in terms of per capita development aid, humanitarian aid, Turkey is the most generous nation in the world today. So this policy is there, and it is going on. And also during the pandemic, we have seen Turkey's humanitarian approach. Turkey was able to provide assistance, medical assistance, to more than 155 countries and also 9 international organizations. And still, we are helping, refugees, not only in Turkey, but also the Syrians, more than 2 million Syrians within Syria, these people are displaced and they need urgent assistance and help. So this humanitarian approach is continuing. So, these are the main challenges that we are facing, and this is the way that the Turkish foreign policy is acting for the time being. And of course, our strategic goal in our foreign policy is the membership to the EU. And Turkey sees its future in Europe, and we feel that it would be in the best interest of not only Turkey, but also the EU to have Turkey as a full member. And we also believe that this membership to the EU is not only a win-win case, but it is a win-win-win case, because with the Turkish membership to the EU, we believe that EU can have a better global actor role, reaching out the Islamic world, reaching out the conflict areas which are actually surrounding Turkey, unfortunately, these days. But we know that with Turkey's might and influence, we can help some of the problems around us. And I always claim that if Turkey had been a member of the EU, or if we had had better relations with the EU, we could have prevented the war in Iraq, and we could have prevented the internal conflict in Syria, and I think we could have prevented the ongoing conflict in Libya. And we could have created a piece of, some sort of a lake of peace and welfare and prosperity in the Eastern Mediterranean as well as in the Aegean. But I know these days will come because Turkey is committed to the process, and Turkey will follow its humanitarian and enterprising policy. So my time, I think, is up. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Kaymakcı. That was a very broad, I think, issues that you have mentioned. So we will just pick on some of the issues later on, but I just would like to turn to Ambassador Ricciardone, who served in Turkey and Egypt. Now, I think there has been a discussion on the foreign policy issues like multilateralism, globalization, protectionism, nativism. These sort of issues are now on the agenda. But also people talk about retuning and resetting foreign policy objectives and priorities. And for example, Biden said that the US will come back, or America is back. In that context, how you see retuning of foreign policies between Turkey, relations between Turkey and US?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ricciardone, the floor is yours.
Talep Hoca. Thank you very much, Talep Hoca. Congratulations first to my friends at TRT for putting on this World Forum. And thank you so much. I feel very honored to be included. I should mention, since you mentioned my past history, 2 disclaimers up front. Turkey and its relations with the world are a first love for me professionally and as a human, since my first visit as a tourist in the 70s, but it's not the current focus of my daily life and attention. So what I will offer more broad historical perspectives and my views. And second disclaimer should go without saying, I'm not representing the United States government, either the current administration or the incoming administration. I speak very much personally. I am now rooted here in another corner of the Eastern Mediterranean in Egypt at the American University. So with those disclaimers aside, Talep Hoca, let me answer your question almost in a single word or two. How do I assess this, the relationship and the situation in a changing world and with a changing American administration? In a word, I'm optimistic. Iyim serim. I believe that while much is changing and always has in the world, we're in a world of accelerating change, very dynamic, big shifts. Maybe the world is more unpredictable than ever. Many people feel that way, but still there's some enduring interests, I think, of Turkey and the United States that are at least as compelling as ever. And I think those will drive the decision-making on both sides, each state having very much leading its popular opinion, but responding to its popular opinion as well. So these underlying verities and things, some of which Mr. Sharbey just touched on, make me believe that this relationship between Turkey and the United States, Turkey and Europe, will be as maybe even more can be as productive as ever, maybe even more so, depending on the choices that everybody makes. First of all, if you're talking just about Turkey and the United States, each side has enduring national advantages and interests in global and bilateral affairs, regional and national security and prosperity, again, as Mr. Sharbey has suggested. Shared values do matter, and some of the frictions in the relations between the United States and Turkey, Europe and Turkey, maybe come from some of those tensions, and we can talk about those. Even there, the United States is, once again, the incoming administration is stressing more than tolerance, celebration of our own internal diversity as Americans, and our openness to the world in all its diversity, very much including the Muslim world. So to the extent Turkey has been concerned about Islamophobia and otherization from the perspective of the West, I believe the incoming American administration has put a real emphasis on returning to America's traditional celebration of our own internal diversity and openness to the world, and productive collaborative relations with the Muslim world in particular. Global causes are once again under emphasis as priorities for the incoming American administration. I did have the privilege of serving in Turkey when then Vice President Biden and then his Chief of Staff, Anthony Blinken, visited in November, I will say, of 2012, if I remember correctly. And they had very warm meetings with counterparts, then Prime Minister Erdogan, for example. And the total conversation was on regional peace and stability, shared values, managing differences, and so forth. Very much in the mode, the traditional mode that, again, Mr. Sharbey has emphasized, of Turkey's traditional policy. Then it was articulated as zero problems with neighbors. Traditionally, you have the picture of the founder of the Republic behind you, peace in the world, peace at home. That was the context of our discussion in those days. Strengthening traditional alliances, very much a a joint problem-solving approach. Rather than arguing so much about differences, we identified them, worked on resolving them, but then we looked at the shared problems. As I've just mentioned, global issues are at the fore now: climate change, refugees and migration, global spread of it, global spread of disease in these very days of the pandemic. But even before this, there was SARS and so many others. These are things that the incoming administration people have spoken about, written about, and I can only guess will be priorities in foreign policy. They are policies and issues that I know Turkey very much shares. I would also state, again, echoing Mr. Sharbey, you've touched on the fact that Turkey has had a long and strong tradition of state, even before the Republic, and statecraft, a first-class diplomatic corps, first-class military, traditionally one of the strongest in NATO, traditionally one that drew its strength from its alliances and valued those alliances and didn't wish to put them at risk. Law enforcement, intelligence apparatuses that had close relations with all of the apparatuses in the world of Europe and the United States. More broad ones, a mixed economy, an educated populace, near universal literacy. All of these things are natural advantages of Turkey that I think offset the natural problems of being surrounded by sometimes weak, failing states, civil wars, sources of migration and dispersions of people. So Turkey has immense national, not only interests, but advantages if it chooses to exploit them in the traditional way. I'm very confident that the incoming American administration will be responsive to those, again, without pretending to speak for them. Why don't I stop there?
Well, thank you for your optimism, Mr. Ambassador. Now, I would like to move on to Ambassador Bitterlich. Actually, he was also ambassador when I was introducing him. I forgot that part. Now, I should add that he has a lot of experience in diplomacy, especially in European affairs. Ambassador Bitterlich, Minister Kaymakcı claimed that European Union will be stronger with Turkey, but as of today, we see that there are a lot of problems between the two, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean. Some countries, individual countries, are taking their issues as if they are a European issue in the European Union, and we see that at the moment the relations are not moving very fast as at least Turkey expects. How would you evaluate the relations between the EU and Turkey as far as relations are concerned, for example, on migration, Eastern Mediterranean, on the Cyprus issue, etc.?
Thank you very much for the invitation, but listening to the Turkish colleague and having observed and being an actor in German and European foreign and security policy in the last 30 years, I'm a bit astonished. Because if I try to be an objective interpreter of what's happening in the last, let's say, 10 years, we are in a strange decade now, accelerated by the COVID virus. You may call this a transition to what I hope better times, but it's a period of absence of strategic reflexes and foreign policy at the end of the day. And what we need in order to resume it in a short way is, let's say, first of all, a deep review of Turkish foreign policy. And second, we need another form, another type, reset of dialogue between Turkey and the European Union. Because when you look objectively at the situation, especially at the neighborhood, Turkish EU director mentioned, then you see a series of common interests between the Europeans and Turkey. And by the way, these neighbors include 2 members of the European Union, at least. And I see so many common interests and vital interests of both sides that we need another form of dialogue between the two in order to overcome, let's say, this deep crisis of EU-Turkey relationship. Because what I fear today is that we will have to look for an alternative, at least for the moment, of a Turkish accession. I fear this. I do not hope it, but I fear it. I stop here for a moment because, you know, I'm tempted to look backwards, to look at least at the last 2 decades. 20 years ago, we were in a sort of illusion on both sides, Turkey and the EU, to launch accession negotiations and to come, let's say, to real fruitful end. I had the same hope at that period. And then we have gone through a sort of alienation between Turkey and the EU. And there are always, as it is in life, 2 responsibles, or 2 responsibles. There's a Turkish one and there's a European one, it's clear. And the Europeans should have been more honest, and Turkey too. We have been both responsible in this field. And when you look at the last years, some people told me, yes, okay, in German you say, viel Feind, viel eher. Or I translate into English, the more enemies you have, the more you are honored. No, this is not foreign policy. I think we should really have a deep look and urgent look at common points, at common interests in order to overcome this crisis. I stop here.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think you have also finished with a optimistic note, as Ambassador Ricciardone has already done so as far as Turkey-US relations are concerned. Now, I just would like to move on to Burhanettin Duran. And on a positive note, that Mr. Ricciardone has finished his speech. But when we look at the issues like S-400, F-35, the U.S. support to PYD, YPG, there are a lot of issues with the United States of America and Turkey. How do you think both countries might overcome such critical issues as some of the observers said they are the red lines for the countries that just we have mentioned?
Thank you, Professor Küçükcan. I'd like to start by thanking to TRT World for providing us this platform to discuss Turkish foreign policy. I will try to talk within the framework of the new Biden administration and its possible foreign policy approach and its impact on Turkey. Well, you would remember when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world in March 2020, I mean in the last year of President Trump's term, many strategic analysts were talking about a turbulence, a new disorder, a chaotic nature of world politics, the decline of the US leadership, the Cold War between China and the US, European Union's deepening crisis, and the great problems of transatlantic alliance. And at the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic's economic impact is supposed to be more serious than even the Great Depression. And at the same time, there were some non-economic expectations, and all of them are quite negative. Political upheavals, collapse of fragile states, deepening of human tragedy in conflict zones, irregular migration, the rise of populist nationalism, Islamophobia, the emergence of new blocs, spread of digital technologies, and the rise of authoritarianism, and so on. And after the presidential elections in the US today, we have two unknowns. What would be the impacts of the post-COVID international order, and what would be the impact of post-Trump era? Because all we know that although Trump lost the elections, but Trumpism will be there, will be in the US. So Biden's administration policy of US new role has some challenges to deal with, not just in terms of power politics, but also domestically, there are many problems to be solved. For example, today we don't know yet what is the meaning of this dichotomy between America first and America back. And of course, we can assume that there will be a new distribution of power, a new political economy and norms in the international arena. And of course, Biden's administration's main challenge will be to establish a new order. But also it is certain that US cannot just roll back the tape. And the so-called liberal order, which Trump made more and more chaotic on a bilateral basis, was already crumbling under the Barack Obama administration. As such, the Biden presidency is less likely to be a third Obama term and more likely to be somewhere between Obama's second term and the Trump presidency. Well, I expect that Biden administration will be pursuing a new balance with China and to some extent more broadly with Russia, and of course try to work more closely with the European Union. But still, there are many problems in front of the strengthening the transatlantic alliance. Today, we know that US President is trying to prepare the transition team and policies, and he will deal with the foreign policy issues by himself. But at the same time, all people are looking at the prospects of Middle East policy, for example, or policy towards Russia. All of them are now in the making. But at the same time, we have reality in the ground, because the US left some power vacuums, especially in the Middle East, in North Africa, in East Europe, in the Mediterranean, and in the Black Sea. So these vacuums, many of them were filled by the Russians, and certainly with a low price. So to roll back those developments, Washington has to cultivate shared interests with European nations, including Germany and also, I think, Turkey. So what kind of policies will be there and what kind of priorities will be pushed by Washington? Still, we are looking for this. But there are some points that I want to raise. If Biden administration will strengthen policy of multilateralism and strengthening alliances, Turkey is in a crucial place for such an attempt, because of the Turkey's recent diplomatic and military activism, especially in the last 4 years. Turkey is playing a very active, proactive role in various conflictual areas, starting from Syria, Iraq, Eastern Mediterranean, Libya, and even Nagorno-Karabakh. And all of the issues between Turkey and the US should be dealt with this new geopolitical reality. For example, the S-400 crisis should be managed within this general framework of strengthening strategic alliance between Turkey and the US. And Turkey's relations with Russia is not a burden. It could be an advantage to have some common interests rather than tensions. Because yes, Turkey is pursuing such an active rapprochement with Russia, but something is very clear that it is because of the US power vacuum in all those regions. But at the same time, Turkey is balancing Russia from Syria to Libya to Nagorno-Karabakh. And Turkey as a country has critical importance for the Western alliance, seeking with Russia under fresh terms. And I see President Erdogan's relationship with Russian Vladimir Putin, President Putin, since 2015 as an advantage. There are some. I want to raise some other 2 points. One is Turkey's foreign policy activism.
Professor Duran, can we take this in the second round, because I think everybody has spoken 8-10 minutes, so we can have more room for discussions. So we have got a very good list of discussants. Okay. Actually, they are also eager to contribute.
Yeah, sure. Sure. If you let me, I just to finish within 2-3 sentences. We should see that Turkey's foreign policy activism is not ideologically motivated. That's why we should get rid of all these of neo-Ottomanism or Islamist foreign policy discussions. This is based on Turkey's geopolitical realities and the power vacuum in the regions surrounding Turkey. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Duran. Now we have got a excellent line of speakers as discussants among us. So they will have 2-3 minutes to engage in the discussions. They may ask questions directly to one of the speakers, or they can raise an issue. They can respond to some of the questions that we have already discussed. I think there are some other issues that we need to maybe tackle, like Turkey's relations with the Gulf countries, Turkey's position in Libya, for example, in the Eastern Mediterranean. As Burhanettin has said, Turkey's relations with Russia. These are some of the issues which I think we have seen some critical voices from around the world. If anyone, I think Mustafa will have the, yes, Professor Mustafa Fishne. It seems that you will be the first to take the floor. Please go ahead, but try to be very effective user of the time. You will have 3 minutes to raise questions, because we will have maybe second round after the first round. So 3 to 5 minutes, please. Floor is yours, Mustafa.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question to Mr. Kaymakcı. He mentioned about the problem of governance. Do you think that as a part of this problem, especially in European countries, there is the problem of lack of leadership, effective leadership? And if so, how this problem affects EU-Turkey relations? Thank you.
I would suggest that we collect questions first, and then we can give the floor to speakers again. So let's collect the questions, if there are any more. Dr. Ali Bakir, floor is yours.
Thank you, Taleb and TRT World Forum, the distinguished speakers, for their valuable and really insightful interventions. Because of the limited time, I would like to just touch upon some of the points and ask some questions to Mr. Kaymakcı and also to Mr. Joseph. As we all know very well, during the last few years, or at least last 10 years, the US has been shifting its focus and resources also to the East Asia, mainly to counter rising China. And this shift, among other factors, actually influenced and affected the region and fueled the competition between international and regional powers in many parts of the world. Now, of course, it's also created vacuum, which the speakers talked about, and this enabled radicalism, terrorism, and foreign intervention in the region. For the first time in the last 100 years, Turkey played a very crucial role in the security of the Gulf region, mainly during the 2017 Gulf crisis. And as we all know also, this region is very important. Many regional and international players are trying to establish a foot in the Middle East and in the Gulf region, and there will be a competition over this region in the future, mainly China, Russia, India, and the Europeans are already there. The Americans are decreasing their presence. So my question is to Mr. Kaymakcı first. What's Turkey's foreign policy vision for its possible role in the Gulf region in the future, if there is such a vision, of course? And second, does Ankara foresee a future in which Turkey and China compete in the Middle East? And third, given the huge leaps in the local indigenous defense industry in Turkey in the last few years, how the advancement in the defense industry affected the foreign policy of the country and the foreign policy agenda and the goals also. Now, I have one question to Mr. Joseph. He sounded very optimistic in his intervention. I would like to believe also in that optimism, but I know that he doesn't represent the US. He doesn't hold any official position right now, but I know also he was an ambassador in the Turkey and Egypt. So assuming he's a US ambassador right now in Turkey and he was tasked to prepare or propose a reasonable recommendation to probably solve the S-400 and F-35 crisis between Turkey and the United States, what his proposal would be in that sense, and what are the main topics that both sides should focus on to move forward, taking in consideration the interest of both sides also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. I think I saw Michael Reynolds raised his hand first. Michael, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. I have my question, I think, is directed to Ambassador Kaymakcı and to Dr. Duran. This past month, we saw Azerbaijan win what was really quite a spectacular victory in Karabakh. And by extension, that was also, I think it's fair to say, a victory for Turkey and particularly for Turkish military technology. In the wake of that war, most observers have been speculating about the possibility of further conflict in the Caucasus, whether it be between Turkey and Russia, Turkey and Iran, Turkey and Armenia. But I'd like to ask, look at things in another direction. With Azerbaijan recovering the Karabakh and the surrounding territories, is it possible that Turkey might be able to normalize its relations with Armenia and open up its borders with Armenia? I believe it was 1993 when, in support of Azerbaijan and in protest of Armenia's occupation of Karabakh, that Turkey closed its borders. In other words, with the resolution of the Karabakh problem, is it possible that Turkey could really change the dynamics in the South Caucasus and normalize relations with Armenia, and thereby essentially lead the region into much more, certainly more peaceful, less conflictual, and more prosperous future? And I'm curious how if anyone is thinking along these lines in Ankara.
Well, thank you, Michael. Dorothea Schmidt, I think you all also would like to make an intervention.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me? I hope there's no connection problem. I wanted to go back to the EU-Turkey relations issue. I think Mr. Bitterlich assumed that there were illusions on both sides at the beginning. So now, 15 years from the starting of the accession process, I'm wondering whether we know each other better, because I think also the fundamentals have changed on both sides. So I have two questions to Mr. Kaymakcı. I would like to know better what is the status of the accession process within the larger Turkish foreign policy frame, because I keep hearing that the EU is a strategic goal for Turkey, and I don't really understand that. To me, a strategic goal is like a place that you want to take in a war or something like that. So I would like to know what does Turkey exactly set in this relationship. So I'm wondering whether we should invent a completely new framework. Are we done with the accession process? Do we have to keep on multiplying sub-negotiation frames, like on the refugee issues, or relaunching the negotiation of the customs union? Or should we invent a completely new type of conference where we put everything on the table and decide on a different, on equal terms, if you want, in some way?
I hope and believe that this question has been understood quite well, because there was a little bit of weak connection. Minister Kaymakcı, did you get the question clearly? Yeah, I think he got the question. Now, Andreas Krieg, I think you also raised your hand, Andreas, to take the floor. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel, and thank you for TRT World for having me. One quick but not very quick, it will be a quick question, but a difficult one to answer, I suppose. Where does Turkey see itself, and that goes to His Excellency, Mr. Kaymakcı, where do you see Turkey between East and West moving forward? I think there have been, we talked about all these different shifts and changes, and what we see in the Middle East for the most part is that the United States have withdrawn effectively under President Obama. Trump has in many ways just continued this trend. And I suppose that under Biden, we will see the same type of effective withdrawal of the US in terms of leading from behind rather than getting directly engaged in the Middle East. So Turkey is a country, obviously, that faces a lot of issues at the moment with EU member states as well. We might even see some sanctions coming in. So it's a very difficult time also in Turkey's relationship with the West in that respect, not just Europe, but also the United States. Where does Turkey see itself in the Middle East? Does it see itself as a kind of bridge between the West or the East, or is it further? Is the orientation grand strategically more towards a pivot towards Asia and the Middle East? And to what extent does Turkey actually is able to live up to its ambitions in that respect? Because what I see is a Turkey that is intensely overstretched in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, and also in the Gulf.
Thank you, Andreas. I think Michael Duran also would like to say something on this issue in the panel. It might be a question or it might be a comment. Michael, go ahead, please.
It'll be a comment followed by a question, and it's for Dr. Duran. I agreed with every word that he said, and in particular his last statement that Turkish foreign policy should be understood in terms of a kind of geopolitical realism rather than an ideology. I'm concerned, however, in my discussions with Americans, including American officials, Europeans, and also Middle Easterners, particularly Israelis and some of the Gulf representatives of the Gulf states, that a kind of doctrine has taken hold that sees Turkish foreign policy as what they call neo-Ottomanism. Islamism is seen as the driving element. Now, I personally don't ascribe to that view at all. I agree with every word that Dr. Duran said. However, I find it very difficult to convince people of this. Even things that I think clearly have no Islamist dimension, such as the Karabakh conflict, given that Azerbaijan is Shiite and Turkey is Sunni, and it's a Turkic nationalist cause, if anything. It's also one that, by my reading of Western interests, is tremendously Turkey played a tremendously beneficial role for the United States in that conflict. But many Americans are not reading it that way. So my question to Dr. Duran is, and to anybody else who might want to address it, is that I think we can see as observers from the proverbial observers from Mars, we can see enormous overlap between the interests of the West as traditionally understood and Turkish interests, if we assume that Turkey is in fact carrying out a geopolitically based foreign policy and not some kind of operating from some kind of ideological agenda. But how do we go about persuading, in particular, American officials that this overlap exists? And when I say how do we do this, is there a kind of common sense strategy that we can adopt, an agenda, a strategic dialogue focused on a few key areas that can reintroduce to Americans the idea that this overlapping interest actually exists? I think it's a priority, personally.
Well, thank you, Michael, for the comment and the question. Now, I just would like to move on to Suhrab. I think you also would like to take the floor. The floor is yours, Suhrab.
Yeah. Talibay, thank you very much. I also would like to thank TRT World for organizing such a great event and a great opportunity for sharing opinions from the different angles and with different dimensions. I have a question to Deputy Minister Faruk Kaymakcı and of course, for those who may want to address the issue, because you have mentioned, all of the panelists have mentioned about the COVID and the impact of COVID and the world after the COVID. So in this regard, my question would be, what is your vision about the post-pandemic, post-COVID world? Because people, it became kind of the motto, post-pandemic, or it became the slogan. But if you are asking about the content of this post-COVID world, how it should be stipulated or how it should be established, there is kind of the blurring kind of division, and nobody has kind of the straight point, because you have raised a very good point about the raising the inequalities, the impact of the climate change, migration, new vision towards the governance in the light of the recent election in some countries, including the United States. So my question, is it the new world will be going through the more strong multilateralism, where the global compact will be run by the all powers, whether it is global power or regional power, in order to see that we are learning, and I'm sure that we will learn, and future reports will show us that those silo approach in the tackling the problems, the self-isolationism is bringing to the point that we are losing the great opportunity, because the collaboration, the cooperation is always something that complement one each other, and it will be bringing some better opportunities for all of us, and of course it will be the great solution for the sorting out regional and global problems, because we are facing tremendous issue with the global warming. We are tremendous issue with the demography, and of course those issues have kind of the negative impact into our environment. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Suhrab. On my list, I have got I have got two more names who did not take the floor, but I think Kadir would like to take the floor now. Kadir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, TRT World Forum, for this opportunity. It's a great discussion. I wanted to comment on Turkish-American relations and ask the panel if they have any comments on this. Basically, Trump administration was able to prevent quite a few of the anti-Turkey legislation in Congress, and Trump became sort of Turkey's best ally in Washington. And now we are moving to a new administration, Biden administration. Again, there's reason to be optimistic because Biden knows Turkey, the region, really well. He knows Erdogan really well, and leadership diplomacy in U.S.-Turkey relationship has been very important, and I think that will play a role. And then the other thing is, I think Biden administration will almost be obliged to follow that kind of reduced role for America around the world. Biden, when he says America is back, I didn't think that he was saying we are going to lead in all matters concerning the globe. I think he meant being part of a more multilateral world system, and they will engage issues multilaterally to partners, etc. But they won't be doing a one-on-one bilateral like Trump was doing, President Trump was doing. But when it comes to U.S.-Turkey relationship, there is the bilateral issues, but then there is the regional issues as well. And we saw under Trump that most recently, for instance, in the Eastern Mediterranean, Mike Pompeo appeared to be almost freelancing. And I don't think that will happen under Biden, because Biden is much more of an institutionalist. He will refer these things to the relevant institutions. But at the same time, there will be some issues, S-400 perhaps, that won't be resolved easily through the institutions like NATO and other sort of multilateral institutions. And presidential politics, presidential leadership diplomacy, let me say, will continue to be significantly important in U.S.-Turkey relationship. So in many ways, we will see the continuation, I believe, in terms of what America can do, what America's role is around the world, and how that will play on regional matters that concern Turkey directly. But at the bilateral level, Biden-Erdogan relationship will continue to be important. I wanted to sort of gauge what the panel might be thinking of in terms of these dynamics, the transition to a much more institutionalist American administration, and how it may play out on issues like Libya, Syria, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Russia, Ukraine, EU, refugees, etc. There are many issues that concern Turkey and the US at the same time. So I wanted to get panel's opinion on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kadir. So on my list, there is Kristian Brakel. I wonder whether he would like to take the floor in this round or he just would like to take it next round. Kristian?
Sure, I can say something. Thank you very much. I don't have a direct question, more a comment, both to what the Deputy Minister Kaymakcı and Professor Duran said. And that is, Professor Duran described the influential role that Turkey holds for Europe, for the Americans, for the Western Alliance, and that Turkey is very much banking on this role to continue being an important ally to the Western Bloc. But I sometimes wonder if this expectation is not a bit overstretched. Coming from Germany, I mean, a country that has very close connections with Turkey, I think the closest ones that we have, like the Turkey has with any European country. I mean, I can see that there is clearly a will to strengthen the alliance, to continue the alliance. But nevertheless, there are certain limits, and we have seen that now in the discussion about the Eastern Mediterranean, where Turkey is directly facing off with France. And while there is quite some bewilderment about the French policies in Libya, for example, in the end, I mean, when things really get difficult, I mean, France is a much more important ally of Germany. The whole European project is built on this alliance, while Turkey is, I mean, compared to that, relatively neglectable. And so I'm wondering if there are discussions within the Turkish administration what to do if this brinkmanship, I would also call it, does no longer hold. Because the one reason why Turkey has so many, I mean, had so many foreign policy successes in the past was, of course, yes, they were decisive, or they were decided to do things, especially militarily, when the EU and the Americans could not decide to take these steps. But I mean, they were also so successful because the Americans, the Russians, and the Europeans were just created a vacuum that they could fill, which over time might change. That is one point. And the second point that I would like to ask to the Vice Minister is, one issue that we have especially seen in discussions within the EU is the interrelationship between foreign policy and the domestic situation in Turkey. It's much harder, for example, I can take again Germany as an example, for German politicians to defend the alliance with Turkey, if we at the same time receive very news from the domestic human rights situation in Turkey. We have heard the president speak just recently about a reset, not only in the relationship with Europe, but also in the rule of law situation in the country. And I'm wondering a bit if you could tell us a bit more what we can expect in this regard. I think very small steps would here go a very long way. For example, the release of political prisoners like Osman Kavala.
Well, thank you, Kristian. As a moderator, I have also questions. I abuse my position as a moderator, actually. One of my questions is to Ambassador Bitterlich, who was not very, I think, optimistic about the Turkish-EU relations. But as Kristian said, President Erdogan has said Turkey's future lies with the European Union, not somewhere else, actually. So that is also, I think, a very clear message. But given your long-term experience in diplomacy, there will be a meeting among the EU leaders on the 10th and 11th of December, and I think there will be some decisions regarding Turkey as well. So what are your expectations from this meeting? That is my first question. Secondly, what would you recommend two sides to bridge the gap between the European Union and Turkey? This is my question to Ambassador Bitterlich. To Ambassador Ricciardone, because he is, I think, living in Egypt, if I'm not wrong, because he's the president of a university that is based in Cairo. And Turkish Egyptian relations are not very warm at all. I mean, how do you think a rapprochement could be possible between the two? What should be the steps should be taken by the individual countries? I think we have got many questions to answer, and our time will finish at 10:45. So if you give precise answers, we will have the second round. Otherwise, we are going to, I think, run out of time. Let's again start with the same order with Deputy Minister Kaymakcı, then Ambassador Ricciardone, Ambassador Bitterlich, and then Professor Duran. Mr. Kaymakcı, floor is yours. So you have many questions. You have many questions, but we.
Yes, actually, I have 4 pages. So let me start with Ambassador Bitterlich. I will reply to him in the words of Jacques Delors. La chance est parfois, le courage souvent, le goût de la vérité toujours. Which means, you know, the chance helps sometimes, the courage often, the taste of truth always. So, you know, we believe in our place in the EU. You know, you are talking about alternative. This is what we have now. The current relation is the alternative to accession, which means we are playing with each other and we are not making progress towards the ultimate goal, which is a win-win case. You know, so we have 3 C's. One is, cooperation. Unfortunately, we have only limited cooperation now, because if we feel that we are not treated fairly by the EU, even the cooperation is limited. The other option is conflict. I am afraid we might have a conflict if we do not find a solution to our differences in the coming weeks and months. But what we desire from the Turkish point of view is the convergence. Convergence is full membership. So we don't see any alternative. And Dorothy mentioned, and I think you also mentioned illusion. From our point of view, there is no illusion at all. Turkey's sincere goal is the fair treatment from its Western allies and full membership to the EU. And we are ready to fulfill the conditions. If, you know, of course, the problem is we made all the progress. If you look at Turkey's history, I think the best time in the history of the Republic of Turkey is from 1999 until 2005. You know, this is the time when we started, you know, all the reform process, when we have been given a clear perspective of accession. So the problem started again in 2009, 2010, when, you know, Sarkozy created problems, and when the EU member states didn't mind Greek Cypriots abusing its veto right against Turkey's accession process. And of course, you know, the whole process went out of track. So, but this doesn't change the reality that Turkey is part and parcel of Europe, economically, politically, historically, geographically, in sports, in arts, in culture. We are the West. Turkey's geography doesn't change. Anatolia is the cradle of European civilizations. Of course, this doesn't mean that we are going to turn our back to our neighbors in the Middle East, or in Caucasia, or in the Med. Of course, but Turkey is part of the West, and as I said, for us, membership to the EU is the completion of our Westernization process, which started with the Council of Europe membership and also NATO membership. So I don't see an alternative. I think the best way is to strengthen Turkey's accession process and to treat Turkey fairly, and not to hide behind the Greek Cypriot irrationalism, or, you know, maximalist Greek demands in the Aegean Sea or in the East Med. So this is the issue. Yes, this is a strategic goal. And Dorothy, you mentioned whether we can do anything. 18 March was there. 18 March included everything, including accession negotiations, customs union update, visa liberalization, joint management of migration, and high-level dialogue on transport, on energy, everything. We are ready to go for it. But who blocks it? It's not Turkey. It's Greek Cypriots and it's Greece. So they decided that they should push for suspension of all the talks, all the cooperation, even in the field of migration. It is not Turkey which stopped the implementation of 18 March, but it is the EU side which didn't keep 3 of the 4 promises which are written down in the 18 March. If you are interested, I can go into detail, but EU is late and little in terms of its financial contribution. EU didn't implement Article 9 of 18 March, which means cooperation in northern Syria, but EU didn't come. And then voluntary humanitarian admission scheme blocked by the EU. And so these 3 promises were not kept by the EU. And we have to be honest and we have to be fair. East-West, where is Turkey? As I told you, Turkey is the West. We are a Western society. We have connected with the West. Of course, we will have good relations with the East. And some colleagues mentioned Turkey's overstretch in different parts of the world. But when we look at our Western friends like France, Germany, Italy, Spain, if you look at their investment and their relations in let's say in Central Asia, in Africa, in other parts of the world, they are still bigger than Turkey's presence. So why we should be worried about Turkey's presence in Africa, in the Middle East more? I think it would be much better if we can do this together with the EU. Then it might bring a real, I think, added value to some sort of competition that we see in terms of tackling, Chinese policy, for example, or even Russian policy in West, for example, in the Balkans, in Africa, or in the Middle East. So, for example, in Syria, we are there alone to deal with this issue, and on the ground we find Russia. In Libya again, basically we are representing the West and we are representing NATO. And I don't understand, of course, the French policy in Libya either. So even the EU does not support this policy. And also because of this, unfortunately, we have tension in the East Med, but also in Libya with our friends and neighbors. And this is why we need more cooperation and coordinated action from the West in these conflict zones together. Some friends mentioned sanctions. Unfortunately, we are at the very lowest level of our relations with the EU. What else will you do? Are you going to entirely suspend the accession negotiations officially? I mean, accession negotiations already came to standstill. Are we going to terminate accession negotiations officially? Of course, this might have some effect, but I know in few years' time we will go back to normalcy, because as long as Turkey doesn't give up, I don't see any major shift in this area. Are we going to suspend the current customs union? We can do that if you like, but it requires 2 sides to act together. If the EU wants to do it unilaterally, this means that 50% of the exports from Turkey to the rest of Europe are produced by EU companies in Turkey. We can punish altogether our companies, if you like, both the ones in Turkey and the Turkish companies in Europe as well. So I don't think that this is a wise attitude. So what we would like to see is a positive agenda. And in October Council decisions, we have seen some positive agenda, rhetoric, but it was made conditional to meeting Greek and Greek Cypriot demands. And of course, we cannot do this. And in terms of our relations with Greece and Greek Cypriots, we have been waiting for, years and decades to find a solution. You all know, who rejected the Annan Plan. You know how Greek Cypriots were made member of the EU. And you also know that, tiny small islands or rocklets in the Aegean Sea cannot have the same rights as the mainlands. So what we are proposing is engagement, dialogue, and negotiations. And our Greek friends are still insisting and making everything conditional, even to start talking with Turkey. So if the EU follows this line, I think we will have to bear the consequences altogether. So what we are saying again, we are for the engagement, we are for the negotiations, and of course the activities of Oryx, the seismic ship, was completed, and the ship returned, and we hope that this is just one indication of opportunity for the start of negotiations or exploratory talks with Greece. And as President Erdogan mentioned, Turkey is also on the path of re-embarking reform process. So we are talking about reforms in judiciary, in economy, and in democracy. So, but we need a little bit of encouragement from our EU friends. So instead of creating a tension and instead of threatening Turkey by sanctions, I think we should try to understand Turkey and why Turkey acted in this way in the last few years. You never went through a coup attempt by FETA which cost more than 250 lives and which created a security-focused Turkey in the last few years. This is true. But how many countries are dealing with three terrorist organizations as notorious as Daesh, PKK, PYD, YPG, and FETA? So let's be realistic. Instead of marginalizing, isolating Turkey, we should extend our hand of solidarity and our hand of alliance to Turkey when Turkey needed this most. So I am optimistic that we can create this atmosphere. In terms of Turkey's defense industry and foreign policy connection, yes. I don't know whether I should say unfortunately or fortunately, but because of some embargo, imposed by our allies, Turkey needed and Turkey had to develop its own defense industry, and it is going quite fast. Thanks to some technologies created by the Turkish defense industry, we made some visible progress in some of the conflicts in different parts of the world, like in Libya, like in Azerbaijan. It is true some Turkish drones are used, but let's not forget also some Israeli drones also used in Azerbaijan. So and Turkey's policy in Azerbaijan, and there was also a question in terms of relations between Turkey and Armenia. From the very beginning, we always told our Armenian friends that we should have a better relation and we should try to establish diplomatic relations. And this is why we signed the Zurich protocols. But unfortunately, these protocols were blocked by the hardliners in Armenia. It was taken to the Constitutional Court and it was blocked. If this has not been blocked, I think by now we could have made a lot of progress, and maybe by now we could have even solved Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. And as you know, Turkey defended Azerbaijan not because of our kinship with Azerbaijan only, but it is also, we believe, and also the international community supported this, that 20% of Azeri territories were under the occupation of Armenia, and the UN and also OECD.
Mr. Minister, can I kindly interrupt you, because we have got not much of a time to reply other questions, and also I think Ambassador Bitterlich might have some responses to you as well. If you can finish very quickly, we can move on to other speakers to answer the questions.
Yes, okay, very quickly. So if we can have, I think, progress in terms of the agreement made between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and why not one day to see Turkish-Armenian land border open? But of course, for this, we need to see that the dispute is solved, and actually it would be in the best interest of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the region as well. So, honestly speaking, in my future EU dream, I also see Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan as well. Maybe this will create some fear in Ambassador Bitterlich, but our EU understanding is as large as Europe means. So I will stop here because I know there are a few questions, but I think I did try to answer most of the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Now let's move on to Ambassador Ricciardone. You have got 5 minutes each, gentlemen.
Since the counselor has focused so much on Europe, I'd be happy to yield the first response to Ambassador Bitterlich, if you would prefer. I can certainly address the region and the American thing, but I don't want to deprive Ambassador Bitterlich of the opportunity.
Okay.
If you would prefer, Ambassador.
Yeah, that's a wise. Yeah, of course, that's a good recommendation. Thank you. Let's move on to Ambassador Bitterlich, please. Mr. Bitterlich, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Americans are always for friends, you see. First, I do not expect the return of the US to the Middle East. Biden will more be concentrated, or much more, on China, on Asia. Second, perhaps to some extent on Russia, but much less on Europe and its environment, much less. And he will ask to the Europeans, please look after your wider region, your neighborhood, up to you. And especially he will ask this to the Germans and to the French, perhaps to the British too. And second, I bear in mind what the colleague of the Böll Foundation said. Yes, I regret there has been a certain, let's say, Turkish foreign policy overstretching its own capabilities and possibilities. Not only from the year 2009, please, dear colleague, let's be open. It began on 2006, 2007, where I sent warning signals to Ankara, but some people listened, others not at all. This came late. And I think even Turkey overstretched its own, let's say, positive outreach in that period. You have been opening a competition with Iran, with Egypt, actually absent to some extent, with Saudi Arabia, and add to this Israel, please, on influence, on priority in the Middle East. It was overstretching. Please, come back down to earth to some extent and talk to your friends, including the Americans and to the Europeans. And let's develop from there, let's say, a common approach. A gunboat policy, even in the Eastern Mediterranean, is not helpful. Please, why not accept, let's say, a sort of mediations, even arbitration by the German presidency, openly. Openly, I think Mrs. Merkel would have been embarrassed, but at the same time honored to take a helpful role with regard to Turkey. But yes, even Kristian Brakel mentioned too, in our internal policies, we need certain gestures. We know, we see Turkey as the blessed nation which is not feeling fairly considered. I understand this to some extent. I understand even this to some extent with regard to the Eastern Mediterranean situation. But not entirely. I can't, let's say, understand your steps. And therefore, what we need from December on, what is my personal wish, I can't speak on behalf of governments, is, let's say, a real view of the overall situation. To look at all the differences, at all these sides, and try to develop, let's say, the common interest between Turkey and Europe. This is my idea about the whole relation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Bitterlich. Now I think we can move on to Ambassador Ricciardone. Please go ahead, Ambassador.
Thank you. And I really didn't wish to speak for Europe. I thought that was a very eloquent statement, Ambassador Bitterlich. I appreciate that the counselor has referred to the possibility of setting a cooperative agenda based on convergence, shared interests, rather than what you also referred to, Mr. Counselor, as the ability to mutually punish obstructing that's there. I suggest that really it is time to seize a moment for what the incoming Obama administration referred to after the Bush administration as a reset opportunity. In any case, the American government is resetting, as we do with every big national election, no matter which party has won in the executive branch or in the Congress. So the United States is resetting. I wouldn't expect a return. There's no return to the world that's been stretched out of shape the way it was. But America is going to move on. Europe is moving on. And when it comes to the stability, the prosperity, the defense of the Eastern Med, the Northern Med, Americans say it takes two to tango. It actually takes four to tango, I think, in that region. Europe, whether you consider Europe the European Union or NATO, Europe is an entity that has many different players, but there's a European kind of identity there that exerts itself in statecraft in one way or another. NATO is, of course, the part that the Americans are part of and that Turkey is part of. I would be very careful about proceeding on the course that Turkey has been on with respect to, very strategic Russian arms. This is an opportunity to take very seriously what NATO has been saying and the Americans have been saying there. It is an opportunity for for Turkey to look at how it might reset its approach to the Northern Med, that is to say, Europe. As from the American perspective, Europe very much includes NATO still, with whatever NATO is going to come to mean as a dynamic organization. But the others, when I say four to tango, we touched on Egypt and Turkey. The linchpins, the strong states that have strong traditions of statecraft, strong military, strong cultural, political, economic force, large populations, of course, are Turkey and Egypt. Israel has a small population, but a strong military, strong international interests and presence. If we could bring Turkey, Israel, and Egypt once again, at least into some kind of alignment, it doesn't necessarily mean warm and fully trusting relations, but a cold, hard look at the national interest in regional security and stability, along with the way that the United States and Europe tends to look at these things, whether it's containing Iranian designs in the nuclear area, failed and failing states, whether that's Libya or Syria, weak states that are troubled like Lebanon and Iraq. I think there are very, very strong common interests among these four, if you will, players. The Northern European tier of Europe, which includes the United States through NATO, regardless of how much emphasis the Biden administration will give it. Egypt, as a country of 100 million people that is quite strong and stable, to whatever its issues internally and in the region. And then Israel. That's an opportunity. I would hope that the Turkish policymakers would take a fresh look at, try to break out of the kind of obstructive or rehearsing the list of historical grievances. Those, I know them as well as anyone, having started my foreign service career in the wake of Cyprus invasion and the U.S. embargo over Cyprus that ended just before I started my diplomatic career in Turkey. There's a long list of historical grievances. Americans tend not to be as good at history as people in this part of the world, or as obsessed by it. Americans tend to, maybe you can think of it as a kind of daily lobotomy when it comes to history. We look forward. and are less prisoners of it. And maybe I would suggest that the way to approach at least the American part, and maybe the Europeans too, is with another rethink of the peace at home, peace in the world traditional Turkish approach, the zero problems with neighbors approach, rather than rehearsing the grievances and litigating, if you will. It shouldn't be a litigious relationship between Turkey and its traditional allies, but rather one that is a joint problem-solving one. And I would never presume to advise the current U.S. ambassador. He's one of our most distinguished current diplomats and actually a personal friend. So I'm not giving him advice on this, much less the Biden administration or the Trump administration for that matter.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now, the last word is to Burhanettin Duran. The floor is yours, but we have to finish sharp at 10:45, Professor Duran.
Thank you. Well, first, Reynolds raised the possibility of normalization between Turkey and Armenia after the resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh. Yes, of course, I certainly I expect such a development, but at the same time, we have to be aware of the reality in the ground that this agreement imposed by Russia is not the final one. There are still some points to be suspicious about any possibility of conflict for the future. The of Nagorno-Karabakh is not decided yet. So, but yes, if Azerbaijan got the lands that they internationally have their rights, then there is a room for normalization. And I personally support for the stability and peace conditions in the Caucasus, in the South Caucasus, and Turkey can contribute to this. But there is something that we should know. Without Western contribution to this stability, just leaving this space to Russian influence, I'm suspicious of it because, you know, this Minsk group is not effective in solving this crisis ultimately, and there should be something done for the stability and peace, and of course normalization between Turkey and Armenia will be after coming this. For the second question, Michael Duran addressed a very critical question because we are so much as Turks upset by the media appearance against Turkey. Turkey is criticized so much for ideological reasons. And actually this issue of overstretch is connected to that. I understand that there is a difficulty in explaining Turkey's military and diplomatic activism in the last 4 years. But certainly this is because of necessity. And Turkey was the last power that intervened in Syria. And because of the terrorism issues, because of the PKK terror corridor in northern Syria. So again, these Daesh and FETA issues were the Turkey's security considerations that, of course, affected Turkey's foreign policy as well. But at the same time, I mentioned in my, there are power vacuums in the region, and Turkey cannot escape from this vacuum. Russia is in Syria, and you are threatened by the Russian military activism in Syria. So you have refugees, 4 million Syrian refugees in your country, and actually 4 million are on the way to come if you do not make operations there. And it is the same in Eastern Mediterranean. You cannot be stuck on the Bay of Antalya. Because of the expansionist demands of Greece and southern Cyprus. So it is again in Libya and actually in Nagorno-Karabakh. So Turkey's military activism is not overstretched. It is because of the geopolitical realism. It is not because of ideology. But this is something new. Let's be honest. This is new, not just for the world or for our allies, but also for our competitors and even for our domestic observers. It is something new, and Turkey is trying to adapt to this reality, and this raises Turkey's status as an active player in many issues. So why I don't consider this as overstretch? Because this is a condition, this is an opportunity that Turkey and Western allies can come together to find the overlapping interests that Michael Duran explained. Well, there is a room for this, but with the condition that Turkey's new geopolitics should be understood properly and within a mood of alliance, with a mood of friends, and not just competitors. And I think Turkey is ready for opening a new page for reset with the US. Yes, Turkey did many things to deal with the chaotic world of Trump era, but at the same time, Turkey is ready for multilateralism, diplomacy, and humanitarian ideals, a new world order that Biden will try to make. I know this is a difficult one, but at the same time, Turkey, in many ways, is ready for this. But at the same time, if there is a turbulent world coming under a Biden administration, then Turkey will also strive to adapt to these realities as Turkey did in the Trumpian world. And the last question, Kristian, on overstretched expectations. Yes, I know that as Turks, we are trying to explain ourselves to our Western allies, and they are sometimes tired of some tensions, either in Eastern Mediterranean or in Syria or in Iraq. But let's be honest about this, that Turkey is suffering from most of all the problems, and we are at the front of these problems, and we are keeping the gate of the European Union as well. So in Eastern Europe, or in Eastern Mediterranean, or in the North Africa, we should find common interests that Turkey and the Western alliance can work together. Otherwise, the power vacuum and great power rivalry will continue in our region, and Turkey will be there as an active player. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Now we come to the end of expert session at the TRT World Forum on the Turkish foreign policy. I wish we had more time for the discussions, but I think we had very critical and constructive discussions and debates on Turkish foreign policy and the challenges ahead. I would like to thank all of you, gentlemen, Faruk Kaymakcı, Burhanettin Duran, and Mr. Ambassadors, and all of the discussants, and also to the audience that followed us today. Thank you, and we hope to see you again in the next TRT World Forum next year. Goodbye to all.